Today, we're going to look at the weirdest creatures, the scariest legends from each country. Let's go! In Portugal, a predominantly Christian nation, most legends incorporate elements of Christianity. One story is that of Maria de Manta, also called Manta, Maria de Grade, or Maria Gancha. She was a kind of boogeyman from Portuguese folklore. To be specific, they call her the water boogeyman because she haunts areas with many rivers and lakes. And since she's a boogeyman, of course, Maria de Manta's favorite prey is children. But unlike most boogeymen, Maria de Manta doesn't really like to go out looking for her prey. She waits until some unsuspecting child walks by the riverbank. Then she pulls the child into the water and they never come back. The descriptions of Maria de Manta vary a lot. Some say she is bald, others say she has hooks instead of hands, and others say she is a kind of nymph with glowing eyes and horns on her head. And finally, there are those who say she looks a lot like a kind of witch, being a poorly dressed old woman who carries a sack on her shoulders. The text mentions Cuca from Brazil, who is also a bogeyman with a song sung to children, similar to the one mentioned. Maria de Manta has lumps in her throat, fire in her eyes, and wood on her horns. She has milk in her breasts. She runs through hills and valleys, and at the foot of altars, and she kills children in pairs. She also hunts those who don't like, subscribe, or share the video. So be sure to do so, as it greatly helps me out. If you're interested in learning more about folklore, take a look at the pinned comment and also join the channel's Discord. This story, as they say, like every boogeyman, was kind of used to keep children safer, to make sure they didn't stay near rivers. But it could also be what's left of the stories about nymphs that were told in the region, or also what's left of an ancient Iberian goddess. Anyway, even though Maria de Manta is a pretty macabre legend, in my opinion, I think the scariest one is the Santa Campanha. The Santa Campanha, to put it simply, is basically a procession of souls, ghosts, or spirits that haven't found rest. They travel on rural paths, roads, or trails always at night. Usually they do this in a very disturbing silence, but they can also end up chanting songs that are typically sung during funerals. Usually they carry candles, and the sign of the arrival of this procession is often indicated by a sudden chill, the smell of melting candles, or a very heavy silence. And the strangest thing of all, what's even more bizarre is that usually the one leading this procession isn't the dead person, but a hypnotized local resident of the village who has no idea what they're doing. The next day, they just feel extremely tired for some unknown reason. They're not walking around aimlessly. Typically, they're warning that someone from that location will die. So if you see this procession, it's not a good sign. There are a few ways to stop it. You could draw a circle on the ground and lie face down, or carry a laurel branch. Facing the procession head-on is not a good idea. This legend is usually remembered a lot on All Saints' Day, and nobody knows exactly where it came from. But they say it may have originated from Celtic legends like the Wild Hunt, or from medieval times because of the fear of sin that people had. Canada has several well-known bizarre legends, such as the Skinwalkers, which actually aren't from Canada but from the Navajo tribe. But I'll talk more about that legend later. For now, let's focus on the Wendigo, another indigenous legend from the Algonquian people. The Wendigo's exact appearance and nature are difficult to describe precisely. It can be described as a spirit, monster, creature, or demon. And about its appearance, usually people who encounter the Wendigo end up dying. And those who survive only say they saw some shadows because the creature is extremely Anyway, some descriptions say it would be a very tall and very thin monster with long arms and legs. In some cases, it has thin, white, blood-stained hair. It has sharp claws on its hands and feet, and it has pointed yellow teeth. It often has blood in its mouth, and its tongue is bluish. And its eyes are bright and can be red or yellow. The Wendigo is usually described as an extremely hungry, cannibalistic creature, and its appearances are usually related to winter and cold. The Wendigo's hunger is insatiable. It hunts all kinds of humans. But it has a favorite part from each person. For example, from children, it prefers the fat. From women, the skin. From men, the muscles. From the elderly, it takes the bones. If it captures you, it may not eat you immediately, right away. That's because Wendigos also end up saving people to eat at a more convenient time. For example, during winter, when finding food is more difficult. The Wendigo is strong, very fast, silent, and can sense your presence from a distance. That's because it has night vision and a very powerful sense of smell, and its claws can easily rip a man's head off. And its teeth can break bones easily. And as if all that wasn't enough, the Wendigo can still imitate the voice of a loved one to lure a person to it. In addition, it can also pass on the fever to the victim, where everything starts with the person sensing a specific smell that only they can notice. Then they start having nightmares, a lot of pain, and this drives the person insane, making them run into the forest and disappear. When it's very hungry, the indigo is capable of anything. It knocks down trees to get to a person, kills animals, and some even say that tornadoes and blizzards are signs that the indigo is hunting. They usually hide in caves and abandoned cabins. The indigo was so thin, it looked sick. Its dry skin stretched over its bones, its skin as gray as death, and its eyes sunken in their sockets. The indigo looked like a skeleton recently unearthed from the grave. What seemed to be its lips were cracked and bloody, impure, and suffering from wounds on its flesh. The indigo exuded a strange smell of death and decay. In France, we do have the famous story of the Beast of Gévaudan between 1764 and 1767. The province, which has the same name, was terrorized by a terrible creature that looked very much like a wolf, but it was said to be taller than a cow, with a long tail, a broad chest, claws like human hands, and a terrible stench. And the beast mainly attacked women and children. Many witnesses said it moved on all fours. With such a description, it's impossible not to think of a werewolf. There were about 210 attacks recorded, resulting in 113 deaths, most with the bodies partially devoured. The first fatal attack occurred in June 1764 with young Jean Boulet. The terror was so great that King Louis XV sent hunters to the region, including his own arquebusier, whose name was Antoine de Bourtin. In September 1765, he killed a creature thought to be the beast. However, the attacks resumed afterwards, and in June of 1767, Jean Castel, a local hunter, killed a new creature with a silver bullet after praying and seeing it standing before him. The animal's body, which had human remains in its stomach, was sent to the king, and the attacks then stopped. And that concluded the mystery of the Beast of Gévaudan. It likely wasn't a werewolf, but just an animal. So I went looking for another legend, which is the so-called Lupeux, which I didn't know existed, but it's really good. Lupeux would be a mysterious and sinister creature from the folklore of the province of Berry, an old administrative division of France, later divided between the departments of Cher, Indre, and Loire. It is generally described as a creature with the head of a wolf, or as a wolf itself, but the fact is that its victims can't see it. They can only hear it calling and provoking them, whether with laughter, scandalous gossip, or even insults. Regardless, it stimulates and piques the curiosity of its victims. They say that the creature calls its victims 3 times, and if the victim answers all 3 times, they end up being caught in a bizarre spell. Once caught in the spell of Lupeux, the victim can't stop hearing it calling for them and ends up following its voice. When the creature's voice finally stops, the victim finds themselves in front of a swamp in a very deserted place. Then the creature pushes the victim into the swamp, and the only thing the person will see is the creature hanging from a branch, looking at them and laughing while they drown. In the United States, there are some bizarre urban legends about killers, like the one about the killer rabbit that attacked people passing through a specific tunnel, which I discussed in a video on this channel. But maybe the most bizarre and most well-known of all the legends is the one about the Skinwalker, which was originally called Yanaldoshi by the Navarro tribe. These creatures would actually be witches, who through witchcraft and everything else would take the skin of an animal, usually an animal with 4 legs, and that's why the translation of Yanaldoche would be on 4 legs. And then these witches would become this animal, which could not only be a wolf, but also a bear. Then the Skinwalkers would gain all the abilities of that animal, Meanwhile, in England, I would go with the Crooked Man. Well, this urban legend ended up becoming somewhat popular back in the 16th century because of a song sung by soldiers, which was kind of a joke, but later it became a lullaby. Later it became an urban legend originating in the 19th century. Theoretically, the English lullaby of the Crooked Man would be based on a real person who existed, General Sir Alex Leslie, the Earl of Leven, over in Scotland. And the real name of the song was There Was a Crooked Man, which said, there was a crooked man. He walked a crooked mile, he found a crooked sixpence, and the song goes on like that. They said that this song was sung by the Earl's opponents, the Covenanters, in the Covenant War, where the general managed to sign an alliance that allowed political and religious freedom in Scotland. This alliance, while important for the people, opposed the interests of many politicians and religious leaders of the time. Ending political and religious differences would allow greater unity and strength among the population. Anyway, over the years, this mocking song turned into a lullaby for children, and the Crooked Man became part of English folklore. Well, nowadays, the lyrics of the song go something like this. I saw a crooked man, he walked without stopping, he found a coin and luck came his way. So he bought a crooked cat and went out hunting, and in his crooked house they all lived together. But the first time the Crooked Man actually appeared as an urban legend was in 1969 when a man named Ryan moved into a strange apartment with his son. The apartment had some very crooked and strange furniture, but despite that, the two ended up staying there and settled into the apartment. However, in the middle of the night, Ryan woke up to his son's screams, and when he got to the boy's room, his son said that a crooked man had tried to kill him. So the father and son left the apartment and spent a few days in a hotel, but they had to return home because of the costs. A few days later, Ray noticed his son was missing and found a very well-hidden attic inside the apartment. There, he also found his son's body, which was very twisted, and a note that supposedly read, "There was a little crooked man who lived in a thorn house." China has many bizarre creatures, such as the Paoxiao from the classic Tale of the Mountains of Evils. It would be similar to a goat, but it also had a human face and human hands. In its mouth it has tiger's teeth, and its eyes are not on its face but in its armpits. They say it inhabits Mount Guwu, and the Paoxiao is a beast that devours men. And to lure its victims, it ends up making sounds similar to a crying baby, which is pretty bizarre. And it's quite similar to Tao Chi, which is one of the 4 Chinese disasters. The difference is that Tao Chi devours everything in front of him, including his own body, and that's even how he ended up dying. But perhaps the scariest of all is Shang Liu. It would be a serpent or a mythological dragon from China, which has 9 heads. Some illustrations describe these 9 heads as being human heads. And according to Shanghai Jin, the classic of mountains and seas, Shang Liu was the monster of the sea god Gong, and it devastated the fauna and flora everywhere it went, leaving behind nothing but ravines and swamps devoid of life. Shang Liu was killed by Yu Wu the Great, the first ruler and founder of the Sea Dynasty. It is also said that the blood that came out of the corpse was so foul-smelling and poisonous that no vegetation ever grew again where it fell. Well, in Brazil, we have many, many very strange legends. And I could talk here, for example, about the Cabra Cabriola, but I think I'll leave that for another video if you guys want me to bring a part 2, of course. But for me, the main creature, the weirdest and scariest of all, is the Besta-Fera. After all, actually, they say it's the most evil creature in Brazilian folklore. That's because Besta-Fera is basically described as the demon, the Cramonho, Lucifer, the hairy hand walking on earth. They say he takes the form of a centaur and walks through the streets of small towns and villages during the full moon. The strangest thing of all is that Besta-Fera isn't walking through the towns, looking for living people or to catch someone specific, but rather he's collecting souls. But in any case, it's clear that you shouldn't try to face Besta-Fera because otherwise you'll probably go insane, and after 3 days the madness might go away or not. You could end up dying as well. The most curious thing of all is that, despite having the form of a centaur, Besta-Fera always walks on its hind legs, just like a human. In some versions of the legend, it is described as having the head of a wolf, or even being headless, just like the headless Mambula. And during its walk on Earth, Besta-Fera is always accompanied by a pack of dogs, which are said to be its hellhounds. They say that the procession, the walk of Besta-Fera, lasts until the city cemetery, where the sound of hooves and also the barking of the dogs disappear. If you enjoyed this video and want more, comment below. Also, tell me which Brazilian legend you are most afraid of, or which one you think is the scariest. Remember to share the video, subscribe, and like. Thanks. Bye.